And let's just get into it. I'm seeing some questions coming in the chat. Raise your hand. You do that in the reactions thing, and I will call on you as they come in. I see two in the chat that I thought I'd address. Someone wants to know, where does compassion fit in with the four virtues? I think that's a great question. I would fit that very clearly under the virtue of justice. How one, the code by which one lives and how one treats other people. I'm just finishing now the second book in my Four Virtues series, which is about temperance or self-discipline. And then I'm moving on to write about justice. So I think the problem when we hear that word justice, we tend to think of like the justice system. We think about crime. We think about matters of law, which of course is a key component of justice. But for the Stoics, I think justice was closer to the idea of a moral code or of ethics. To me, compassion and empathy being a huge part of that. And in fact, one of the only instances that we have of Marcus Aurelius sort of with his guard down involves him weeping over the immense scale of the tragedy of the Antonine Plague. Someone in court had made an offhand comment to those who had died in the Antonine Plague, and Marcus sort of breaks down crying. So this idea, again, that the Stoics don't have emotions, that they don't care about other people, to me is totally belied by the facts. And I think now that we've experienced our own plague, and you can think for a second about, for instance, just in America, just how enormous that number is, 1 million people. And then what's 5 million globally, just the immensity of that scale. I think it does elicit, if one is understanding the Stoic concept of justice or common good, the hive, that we're all in this together, that should strike you. And I see someone pointing out that Iron Maiden is playing in Austin on the 13th of September, because I'm wearing an Iron Maiden shirt. They are indeed, and I'm very excited about it. They've played in San Antonio a couple times the last few years, which I have seen, but I am excited to see them in Texas. Let us go to the questions. Lori, what do you got for us?
So thanks, Ryan. So I've been at this for about 2 years now. And the good news is there's more space between what happens to me and how I respond. It's kind of like getting a pause button that wasn't installed at birth. But when I was reading through, I think it was yesterday or day before yesterday, and you were talking about, the deep breathing and all that, it felt very calm and very serene. And in my case, I'm deep breathing, but it's usually through clenched teeth. And the time period feels like, a scene where somebody's diffusing a bomb. And I'm wondering, how long does it take for some of that to get better? I mean, is there another trick I'm missing or something? I mean, is it?
I'm probably not the expert to ask about deep breathing or sort of meditation strategies, as I very much relate to what you're just talking about. That's sort of where I feel myself. Even like 30 seconds or a minute, it can feel like an eternity, and you're just breathing, and you can sort of feel that intensity that you're talking about. So I don't have a magical answer for you, but I do think it's something that occurs with time. When you talk to people who've meditated forever, it's still hard for them. Just like when you talk to someone who gets up early, it's still hard. There's still a lot of mornings when they, wish that they didn't have to. But I do feel like a muscle. It's a bit like a muscle, and it grows. But I think the growth is a little imperceptible. Maybe with a long passage of time, you can perceive where you were and where you are now. But sort of day to day, I can certainly relate to that expression. Someone's asking, they said, with YouTube, podcasts, newsletters, books, you must work 29 hours per day and 9 hours per week. How do you organize? Actually, I think people would be surprised if they actually saw my work schedule. I mean, I do work a lot, but I try to find the most efficient way to do it. I try to find systems for doing it. And then, I try to find ways to scale what I'm doing. I actually have a chapter in the new book about Martin Luther King. The singer Harry Belafonte calls Martin Luther King's house one day. He's trying to get a hold of Martin Luther King, and Coretta Scott King answers the phone. And so he's talking to her, and she says, Martin's not home right now. Obviously, this is a world before cell phones. And as Belafonte is talking to Coretta Scott King, he finds that she has to put the phone down to let the kids inside, and then she has to put the phone down to put the food in the oven, and then someone's at the door, and then one of the kids is crying, and she's running around, sort of not able to even be on the phone in an uninterrupted way for more than a few minutes. And Belafonte says, I know this is a sensitive question, but don't you have any help? You're just doing this by yourself. And she says, well, of course, she says, I'm doing it by myself. My husband's a minister, but she says, and he would simply not allow us to have any help, even if we could afford it. She said he felt insecure about it. And Belafonte says, that's the most absurd thing I've ever heard in my life. And it ends right now. I'm hiring a staff for you. I'm paying for it. And I don't want to hear a single objection from you or Martin about it. And this is actually a sort of an underrated but critical moment in the civil rights movement, because, or at least this is a story I'm telling, because Martin Luther King was having trouble scaling what he was doing. He was both too concerned what other people thought, and then sort of too controlling about how it was going, and ultimately having some help allows him to scale what he's doing. So all of which is to say, I do have a significant amount of output, but that's also because I have a team behind me, not just an editor and a publisher, but even you can hear me referring to Billy on this call. Billy is one of the people who helps write for me at Daily Stoic, organizing this call. I have a whole team of people that help me scale what I do. I still do the core important functions. They're still my ideas, but I am focused on how do I make what I do more productive and efficient so it can reach more people, which some people don't like, maybe some people can't do. I realize there's a certain amount of privilege in this also, but all of which is to say, being a Stoic does not mean taking on an endless burden and gutting it out yourself, white knuckling it yourself. It's also, I think, about creating systems. It's about not being so egotistical that you have to be in control all the time. And that's a big part of how I'm able to be productive is the team that I have behind me. Let's do Nick B. Can you unmute yourself? Hi.
Hey, Ryan. I have a report and then a question. The report is I asked you a question at the first office hours about hard decisions.
Yes.
I wanted to report that your suggestion really, really helped. And
amazing.
Time will tell, but I feel very good. The inner scorecard feels very good about the decisions
Great.
I had to make. And the thing that stuck with me, that's kind of come back to me every day, was you said tuning out the noise to tune in to what is right. And that's sort of been a little mantra for me. So thank you so much for that.
Fantastic.
My question has to do with the email for today on mentoring.
Yes.
I think I've mentioned to you before, you've kind of been a mentor from afar for me through the book.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Podcasts and stuff. And so I wanted to see, I've been lucky enough to have mentors, a very good mentor in my career and a mentor sort of in my life. The next step of where I'm trying to go is I want to write and I want to podcast. I've been kind of doing a low key podcast for a couple of years. I have a couple hundred listeners. And I wanted to ask a very specific question of if you were to help somebody to say, I want to get to the point where I could podcast with somebody like you at your level. I would like to say, I really enjoy your podcasting. I think you're the best 1 hour podcast out there. And I listen to
thank you.
Yeah. You've really got the 1 hour frame down in an awesome way. And I've watched you get better over the years too. So if you were to mentor somebody to climb to that level, what specific things beyond the sort of low hanging fruit of put in the work every day and systematize routine?
Yeah, I think the big thing about podcasts or writing or whatever it is, I'm always trying to push people towards finding what's unique about what they have to say and what will help them stand out in the market. So like even the Daily Stoic podcast, it started as just me reading the email, then it expanded to one interview and it was 30 minutes, and then it was 2 interviews a week. Anyways, I think a lot of people try to just compete with the endless amount of stuff that's out there. And I think the best decision you can make is to find out what's the version of what you're doing that only you can do. So then you have a monopoly on that thing, and then marketing is easier and attracting fans is easier. It's more authentic and natural and all of that. So I usually try to help people strip away either pretense or fear or insecurity that is making them not unique enough.
Beautiful. Thank you.
All right. Awesome. I'll go to the only other person I see in an Iron Maiden shirt.
That's me, I guess.
All right.
Hello, Ryan. It's
Hi.
nice to be here again.
Yes.
This year.
Yes.
I had something to report from December, something that,
Okay.
that happened to me, and how I use Stoicism and how I use our stuff, and how your
great.
email was the most perfect timing possible.
Okay, perfect. Let's hear it.
Last December, I realized that my grandma is going to pass away. And being Slavic, being very tight-knit in the family, spending most of my life with her, I dig out the books and I was getting ready. And I had several days by my own accord. And I was reading your stuff. I was reading stuff from Stillness is the Key. I was reading stuff by Ivo Andrić, Science by the Roadside, great
Sure.
Serbian writer who won the Nobel Prize in 1961. And I was reading one great book by Eric Weiner, The Socrates Express. I love that book. And I would recommend it to everyone. He starts his books by chapters. He dedicates every chapter, one chapter per philosopher. So he starts the book, How to Get Out of the Bed, like Marcus Aurelius. And then he ends the book, How to Die, like Montaigne. And
Sure.
it was the last part that I was focusing on. And of course, the day comes because of the quarantine and COVID and everything. I'm the only person in the hospital. And in a way, it was like Stoics. It was my job to be there. It was hardest for everyone, but it was easier for me because I learned how to cope with it. So it was me there who was the last one there, who paid the respects and everything. And then I could see by the doctors that they were very surprised the way I cope with it. They were not expecting this. You can see on their faces and everything, they were surprised because they get very different. They experience that every day, day to day, and they learn how to cope with it, how to deal with it their own way, because otherwise their life would be completely unbearable.
Sure.
But you could see that they are not used to get people that can tune out and they can take this as a natural occurrence of life. And that comes where Montaigne wrote that all of the philosophy in life is converging at one end point, which is teaching us to not to be afraid to die.
Yes. To philosophize is to learn how to die. He's saying, quoting Cicero.
Yes. And at that point, I exit the hospital, and of course, I'm holding my phone. I'm calling my mother, and after that, that is where my grieving time starts. And you are looking for everything, for anything to delay it. So
Sure.
You're trying to find any kind of distraction or anything. And that moment, the Daily Stoic email arrives on my phone, and I'm not surprised by the moment it arrived, because it always arrives about the same time of the day, and I know that time, and I take this 5-10 minutes just to kind of read it through and take time and reflect on everything. The problem is that this time I see the email, and the title says, "No one is unbreakable." So it was, and this is one which starts, no one, not even a Stoic, is unbreakable. And it says, we have a long history of Stoics being devastated by things. And it couldn't be better timed, better email on that day, in that hour, when I was holding phone in my hand, looking for any kind of distraction to actually, initiate the phase of grief and give me support. It was beyond perfect moment. And I wanted to share it with you because I know that writers like you, they feed on these things. They need these stories, because I basically write for a living myself. It's in a financial world, but I still have to write every day. And sometimes it leaves me very short on time where I could, write myself the stuff that I would really love to write. But I wanted to share this story because, these are the stories that really, they grow on you. They kind of give you these moments in your life. You remember them forever.
Well, I'm honored to hear that. I'm sorry to hear about your grandmother, and I
But
am
don't
honored.
worry. I mean, she was 95 years old almost. So if I could live to that age and to be perfectly healthy and read to the end of my life, I would sign that immediately.
I totally agree. I just found out my grandmother died about 3 hours ago at
Have
85.
my condolences.
Thank you. But this is what, when we talk about the philosophy being a thing that you use it for moments like this. And Cicero and Montaigne are right. At the end of life is death, and it is the thing we are training and preparing for and cannot escape. And it's not just our own death, but the death of people that we love and care about. And so this is where grief comes in. This is where managing extreme emotions comes in, and figuring out how to be of use and of service to people while we can. So I appreciate that. Thanks
for so.
Peter. Hi.
Hello. I'm a Vietnam era veteran, and my Stoic experience, I guess that sticks out in my life, occurred back in 1972 when, as an alternative being drafted into the Army and being trained to kill people, I joined the Air Force, went into the medical field. But then a year later at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, I experienced in October 1973 the Yom Kippur War. And that base was heavily involved in helping Israel during that event. It was also had B-52s with nuclear weapons that started again flying to the Soviet Union. And then there were gasoline lines. And then in the newspapers, angry Americans said we should go to Saudi Arabia and get our oil. And I thought, yes, that's what imperialism does, is get the natural resources rather. But it occurred to me, like the Civilian Conservation Corps of the 1930s, that we needed a youth energy corps. Now, this is in relation to day 7, what sets Stoicism apart. Robin Waterfield's mentioning the Heracles circles.
Yes.
In 1979, a congressman in San Jose, California, proposed challenging youth between 17 and 18 to moments of Stoic thinking by using the registration process of the military draft. Not to draft anybody, just to have them register at age 17.
Sure. The selective service thing.
And challenge them to think about what are civic values and civic education, and to provide an ice bucket challenge of volunteering in their local communities with nonprofits, or his proposal for a AmeriCorps type program, or military service. And I propose a youth energy corps as part of that to counterbalance a future US war in the Persian Gulf.
Sure.
Now, for the last 42 years while working in a hospital lab, I've asked experts like you and politicians, generals, to take on this mantle to look at this theory and consider its implications. And after 9/11, I started getting photographs with hundreds of speakers at events and giving them information. I learned how to explain this in 1 minute, and then put it up on Facebook, Twitter now, LinkedIn, and the feedback is like zero. Even with people where I go, hi, here's a picture of me, Senator Biden, President Biden, and or lesser people, it's still silence. So now I want to create a tombstone website. I'm comfortably retired, and I want to create this website that I call my legacy website, to carry on after my death. And the primary function is to reach out to all these people and document their silence. It's a version of open letters. I just want to do an index of professors at universities, people in Washington, D.C., and experts like you, and say, can you provide me some acknowledgement that you got the information and feedback if you choose to, but here's your little section on my Tombstone website showing your apathy and indifference. And any suggestions on doing that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I like the general idea. I was actually just reading about this as Jimmy Carter is a character in the two books that I'm writing now. I think sort of an underrated president, but he proposed in the 70s a moral equivalent of war based on the famous William James essay to address the energy crisis, which people laughed at him. He put solar panels on the roof of the White House, and everyone said he was an idiot and a loser. And Reagan quickly took them off. This isn't to get political, but it's just to say that this has been a slow-moving crisis that we have ignored at our peril. So I understand your frustration. I guess I don't know if shame or is the tool that's going to get people to act, because if it was, we probably have seen that tool work. I would just urge you not to give up. I think you're right. I think we do need a youth movement as far as energy goes. I would just argue that Gen Z and the generation beneath them are probably, of all generations ever before, the most primed to hear what you're saying. So I would just encourage you to keep at it and not give up quite yet, because I like the idea and I think it could make a big difference.
Can I say one thing more?
Yes, real quick, then I'm going to move on.
Yeah. I have about 10 letters from the last year of Jimmy Carter's White House, letters from the Reagan White House, from Clinton's White House, and from Bush Jr.'s White House, saying, thank you for the idea. Thank you for the idea. And that's about it.
Yeah.
All right, goodbye.
All right, thanks. Conway.
Hello.
Hello.
Good afternoon. Thank you.
Hi.
So I've just got a question. I was in the military for 27 years, and all the military schools would teach you the Sun Tzu art of war.
Yeah.
So know your enemy.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I deployed to 3 war zones. So I think I speak from experience that what I see today, I can link back to previous wars. So I can link back to the Gulf War, to Iraq and Afghanistan, that we're not looking at things from the other people's side. We're not,
Sure.
And I don't see, I've been looking, but I can't find in the Stoic writings, and I'm new to this, but I can't find where anybody addresses, you need to put yourself in the other person's shoes.
Sure.
Whether you agree or disagree is not the question. You still need to look at it from the other perspective. Can you give?
Yeah.
Part of my problem is I can't read because of the military. I have trouble reading. So
Sure.
Anything you can give me, like on YouTube or something
Sure.
like that, would be appreciated. Thank you.
Billy, can you put in the email that we did last week, the audio version of it? We just did an email. It's basically saying, Marcus has this great quote in Meditations where he's saying, against our will, our souls are cut off from truth. And his point was that most people who are wrong or are doing something incorrectly are not aware they're wrong or doing it incorrectly. There's a logic to what they're doing. And so I think sometimes when we think about empathy, we mistake empathy as meaning like, I sympathize, I agree, I endorse what you're coming from. To me, there's a rational case for a kind of empathy that is like, well, why do you think what you're doing makes sense, right? Like, what is the logic underpinning the decisions you have made? And we sort of talk about this in relation to a lot of misinformation and disinformation in the email. He's basically talking about like they don't want to be wrong and they don't know that they're wrong. And so I think when I think about this from a strategic standpoint or a war standpoint in the perspective with what you just brought up, it's, well, why are they if you assume that your enemy is stupid, if you assume that your enemy is irrational, you're going to miss why they're doing what they're doing and then what they're likely to do next, because you are not understanding the logic that underpins it. So this email that I just posted here about how to be more patient with people in the chat might be helpful. But then the other thing, and someone brought this up, Hector just mentioned, what I love about Seneca is the philosopher that Seneca quotes the most is Epicurus, right? His rival. And Seneca says that actually we should read like a spy in the enemy's camp, that we should not just put ourselves in the shoes of the enemy, but we should read and consume and think about the things that they think a lot about. That isn't to say that we have to agree or that we have to change our mind, but that instead of straw manning the opponent's argument, we should steel man the opponent's argument, which is to really understand who they are, why they're doing it, and then that can help us either come to terms with that person or in other cases defeat that person because we've gotten inside their head.
So I remember your email from last week.
Yeah.
And I thought at that time, and what got me started on this was that both sides can have the same value system. It's the perspectives and the biases which makes them think they are correct. Sure. And we don't share that same perspective. I mean, we can do politics in this country just as well as Russia and Ukraine, but
well, that's what Lincoln says, in his second inaugural address, right? That both sides prayed to the same God, right, thinking that they were in the right. And that is the tragedy of so much of the conflict and problems that we have in the world, is that the people who are doing the quote unquote bad thing, think they're doing the good thing, and perhaps they're being courageous or determined or self-disciplined in the pursuit of that, right? And that, so you watch someone take a principled stand on the wrong principle, and it's tricky because you respect the way they're doing it, perhaps, but what they're doing it in the pursuit of is incorrect or based on bad information.
Okay.
All right, Jacques.
Hey, Ryan, how are you?
Hi, good.
So first, condolences to you and your family, and on behalf of everyone here, I just want to thank you very much for doing these office hours to help all of us, despite the things happening in your personal life.
My pleasure.
So I've been practicing for a few years Stoicism, and first heard about you from Tim Ferriss, and then I read some of your books, The Obstacle and others, and got into William Irvine's Guide to the Good Life, and then some source material like meditation. But I would still kind of describe myself as a beginner, but I've experienced some early success molding Stoicism into my daily life. And I don't think I'm ready for this today, but perhaps someday, I would like to be able to write about Stoicism and promote it more broadly. And I think the world would just be a lot better off if we all thought just a little bit more stoically.
Sure.
And you've done an incredible job introducing large numbers of people to Stoicism, but you think there is room for something more organized, almost like a kind of secular Sunday mass, or maybe like the original philosophical schools where people can learn together and help create more on-ramps into Stoicism. Do you have any advice for someone who would be interested in doing that in the future, or any opinions about it at all?
Well, I love hearing that. And look, I think to identify as a beginner in Stoicism is, I think, a sign that one is perhaps more than a beginner in Stoicism. One of the interesting points in Gregory Hayes's translation of Meditations is that he points out that nowhere in the historical record does Marcus explicitly identify as a Stoic. Instead, he just identifies as a student of philosophy, right? He doesn't say, oh, I'm a wise philosopher. He doesn't say, I've become a Stoic. He's just on the path, right? And that's sort of how I would identify as well. Obviously, it's been something I've been writing about and thinking about for a long time. But I think if you identify, the second you identify as having done it or figured it out, you've probably missed the point. I like the idea of more organized sort of schools or structures to pursue the philosophy. It's not like what gets me excited. Like as a writer, I'm excited about writing about it. And so that's the path that I've chosen. And I've expanded a little bit to courses like this, or to some forms of video and talks and stuff. But if someone were to figure that out, I mean, I think it could be great. That Alain de Botton has this thing called the School of Life, which has these sort of philosophy schools all over the world. And I've seen some of those. I think that's cool. Of course, religious institutions have, I think, cracked the idea of ritual and community, which I think is really important. And there were obviously Stoic schools. I talk about this a lot in Lives of the Stoics. So I think there's precedent for it. And it could certainly make sense. So I don't know if I have any advice other than like, it'd be cool to see someone try and, learn along the way.
Thank you.
Awesome. Isaac.
Hey, how you doing, Ryan?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm blessed. Thanks for asking. First thing I want to say is I want to let you know that I appreciate you for dedicating your time and your passion to this space.
Oh, my pleasure.
No problem. And sharing that information with us. I discovered your work by accident. I was actually reading the Bible on humility, and I wanted to read further on that information, and it pointed me to your book, Ego is the Enemy.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so yeah, this has served a great value in my life, and I really appreciate your work. I guess my question is I want to say is, it's kind of like a two-part question. It's kind of like trying to identify, not necessarily a contradiction,
sure,
but as far as like a balance thing. So as I study information about anything people that have accomplished success have done, usually even great authors like yourself, Robert Greene, or athletes, Tiger Woods, any person that has achieved anything great, it usually is a result of them being committed to a particular space.
Sure.
And being very dedicated to that space and putting in the time, the energy. And with that, you usually are making some sacrifices from other things, right?
Of course.
Right. Whether it be family, whether it be fun activities, nights out, whatever the case may be. And the thing is, even though when you're committed to something that you're passionate about, a lot of the things that you're sacrificing don't feel good, right?
Sure.
It's like to endure those sacrifices, it comes with some type of pain, right? And some type of like, man, I wish I actually would rather be doing that right now, but I love this so much. And just because I'm doing it and I'm committed to it, doesn't mean that it's not painful for me to be doing what I'm doing versus something I would probably rather be desiring doing. So my question is, I wanted to ask, like, for instance, like Marcus Aurelius and the great Stoics, how were they able to stay committed?
Can we mute that? Thanks. Keep going.
I was wondering, how were they able to keep that balance in the sense of like trusting the process of what they're doing? Or just you, for example, and I use example, like you first came out, you was writing a book about marketing.
Yeah.
And your passion was in the Stoics, obviously, is what I think. And you made that courage leap to say, hey, although I've been kind of semi-successful in this, I'm trusting the process, I'm following my passion. But at the same time, taking the Stoics' advice when they say, well, trust things are how they come, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, and I'm gonna wrap it up here, how do you balance the two advice, right? It's one, accept things how they come, but at the same time, anybody that has ever accomplished any great, they don't really accept things how they come. So if it's an obstacle, the Stoics advise us to take it how it is, but all the greats, they don't stop. It's like, that's an obstacle. I must overcome that. Like any grace, like Elon Musk or anybody.
So I think you're right to identify it as a tension, right? That's key. It's not 100% this way or 100% this way. There's a sort of a paradox or a balance that you have to figure out. And it's sort of dialing that in is really important. My friend Austin Kleon, who I just had out, and I recorded an episode of the podcast with him that hasn't come out yet. He has this great rule. He says, work, family, and scene, pick two, right? So the idea is that there's no pursuit of anything that's important to you without trade-offs, right? So if you want to be great at sports, if you want to be great at writing, if you want to be great at business, that's going to take up a disproportionate amount of time. So does that mean you can't have a family? Does it mean you can't have friends? Does it mean you can't blah, blah, blah? No, it just means you can't have all of those things. So you have to figure out what are the most important things to you and then be willing to ignore or be bad at or to sacrifice those other things. And this is also true for career paths. Like, of course, I would love to also be writing marketing books and to have continued to grow my marketing business. But at a certain point, I had to ask myself, well, can I do all of it? Not really. And then what did I feel like I was really put here to do? Right. So I was there was a time in my life where with brute force, I could do more of it. But then as I got better and as I had other priorities, I had to change and trade and work out that balance. So it's different. It's like when you're young, you can eat whatever you want. And then as you get older, if you want to continue to stay in shape, you have to start to change your diet, right? Even if you're working out the same, because your metabolism is changing and your life is changing. So I think, have things that you're willing to jettison. Maybe you can do it all for a while, but as you get better and better or higher and higher, the level of competition gets more intense. And the opportunity costs get higher and the stakes get higher and the margin for error gets smaller, right? And so as you go, you have to, I think, dial in and, Marcus Aurelius' question is like, what's essential? And then when you eliminate the inessential things, you get to do the essential things better. If that makes sense.
Awesome. That makes sense.
Cool.
Can I ask you one more thing? It's just
I
want you to define a quote from Marcus Aurelius.
Okay.
Give me 1 second. It says, Marcus Aurelius says, get busy with life's purpose, toss aside empty hopes, get active in your own rescue. I was just trying to identify what did he mean by that in a sense.
I think there's you could infer that he's talking about exactly what we're talking about. So like, what do you really put here to do? What's the most important thing? Stop trying to have it all. Stop trying to think that someone's going to magically figure this out for you, right? Stop, get started now at carving out the life or the practice that, you want to have.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. I really appreciate you so much.
I don't mean to be rude. This is the lady with the white hair. You don't have your name on it. Just says iPhone. So go for it. Yeah.
There we go. Am I
go for
unmuted?
it. No, you're good.
I live in New Zealand.
Oh, so wonderful.
I've had fun getting the times right. In fact, I'm sitting at work here. And
what time is it there?
7 a.m.
And what's the date?
It's Tuesday, the 5th, or
Well, it's still the 4th year, so you're a day ahead of us.
Oh, no, that's right. I mean, I'm time traveling.
Yes.
Hey, look, Ryan.
What's the future like?
Pretty good. We're still here. That's what I say when everyone ever says, am I here? And so I'm still here. So all good. Now, sorry about your grandma, but you took it the right way. You were stoic and you turned up here.
I tried.
Now, look, good man. I picked you up through Medium. And I found a book at my work at school with your sayings on how to get on at work, which you did a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I moved on from there.
Okay.
I'll tell you what, I now read your Daily Stoic every morning. I also match it with Tolstoy's book.
Oh, I love that. Here's my copy.
Yeah,
I
you
keep
know
it
the
on my
one,
desk.
the last 15 years of his life, Tolstoy, that's the one. Yep,
Yep.
that is brilliant.
I love it.
So you sort of pick up sometimes different, but sometimes it matches. It's interesting.
Yes. Agreed.
But I pass that on. Okay. I'm trained as a scientist, but the memento mori came up with me with breast cancer about 10, 15 years ago.
Oh.
When I was told I had about a 50% chance of living, that sort of moved my brain onto doing what I want to do and enjoying what I haven't got, but accepting what you have. I now, in fact, I've moved away from being a boring science person. I now, in fact, am a proofreader as well.
Oh, wonderful.
Because I love books. I love learning. And I'm almost a researcher, I have a feeling, because I dig things up for people. And in fact, I'm now proofreading a book for on slavery, and that's been fascinating.
Wow.
And also, but Barry, John Barry, the one on Mississippi.
Yes, Rising Tide.
Brilliant.
I love that.
And if you ever want to know about the pandemic, read his book on that as well.
Yeah, the Great Influenza. Yeah, I have it here somewhere. It's an incredible book. Well, thank you so much for sharing.
There you go.
But
I'm loving what you're doing.
I love hearing that. Well, someone was asking me what book we're talking about. This is Tolstoy's Calendar of Wisdom, which we'll link to. And I opened it up.
Put a link in because it's it matches very much what you do on a slightly broader basis. He does, in fact, quote Marcus Aurelius.
I was just going to say on the entry for April 4th, he quotes Marcus Aurelius. He says, "Try to live your life and be happy with your destiny, acquiring inner peace by love and good deeds."
You've got it. That's
beautiful.
One.
All right.
Yeah.
Amazing.
God bless you.
You
also,
too.
I've gone through the Buddhist and the Christian pathways to you as well. There are many links.
All right.
I think there's a world eternal wisdom there. God bless you.
Amazing. You too. I don't know how to pronounce your name. Is it Saragan?
Liz?
Hi.
Oh, sorry.
Hi, Ryan.
Hi.
Yeah, it's Sarangan.
Sarangan.
Yeah, coming from Toronto. I was just actually painted porch on Saturday, so I'm just recovering from the return trip back from Austin.
Oh, amazing. Well, thanks for coming by.
Yeah, no worries, man. Firstly, thank you so much. Your work's been profound, and I'm a physician. I'm a neonatologist, and I've been practicing for 8 years. And I'm sorry about the specificity of the question to the rest of the group, but I attend these high risk deliveries, and sometimes, sadly, the baby doesn't oftentimes survive. And our shifts are quite long, so I have to work these 15-hour shifts right after and be cognitively kind of in tune. Do you have like Stoic principles like in real time that I can apply? I take my journal to work and kind of journal about it, but to try and deal with that emotional demand and then stay focused to attend more deliveries after.
Well, I can imagine that must be gut-wrenching and difficult, and obviously it'd be preferable if there was some process by which, if it happened, you would have breaks or whatever. I guess maybe I might take a cue from athletes, which is like, what do they do after they strike out? Or what do they do when something goes bad? Like, how do they come back to themselves, right? Obviously, the next day in practice, they're going to review what went wrong. They're going to review film. But the key thing, like in the game, is like, how do they come back to being present, right? It's all about being present. Because if you're carrying what just happened, you're not only going to, the thing you have to do next is already hard, and then you're making it harder because you're still carrying what just happened. So I might try to think sort of ritually, how does one process this? And I used to have it here. Someone sent me this really cool, maybe I lost it. Somebody sent me this little, it's this like little wooden container, and it has this incense in it. And it's this monk, it's something that Buddhists would use. Basically, it's like it's kind of like a smelling salt. And so the idea is you put a little bit of it in your hands and you rub it together. and then you sniff, and it creates it, there's no like chemical reaction to it, but it's like the smelling, that ritual is supposed to create kind of like a fresh start, like in the way that a chime or a bell or praying 5 times a day, or whatever the religious ritual is, creates kind of like a reset or a refresh. And so I might think, and again, you watch this with athletes, like they strike out, they step out of the batter's box, and then they hit both shoes with the bat, and then they point to somewhere in the crowd. This is all, or if you watch basketball players and how they do their free throws, there's usually a ritual, especially after they miss that first free throw. They go through this kind of reset process. And so I might think, what is the process by which it's a totally made up thing, but what's the process that you do that's like, I'm wiping the slate clean, I'm starting forward, I'm processing what's happening, and then I have to go back out there. And I don't think you're literally wiping the slate clean, because really you're saying, I'm going to come back to this later. I just can't afford to be consumed with it or carry it around now. So I might look up some stuff on that and see what you can find.
That's wonderful. That's invaluable. And thank you for the work. And
of course,
another chat.
And thank you for your work. It's obviously very important. Ari.
Hey there, can you hear me?
I can.
Hey, first of all, condolences, Ryan.
Thank you.
To you and your family. And, even though I'm sure you'd rather be doing something else, hopefully, the love you can feel on this call from us is a little bit of a gift that we can give to you for all that you've given to us.
Yeah, of course. Indeed.
So my question today is, I also consider myself a beginner. And, I'm just trying not to take things too literally as I read. So for instance, dealing with those who harm you, dealing with those who may betray you or speak badly about you, those are things that we kind of look as not within our control. You can't change what other people do or say, but we don't, or at least I haven't read too much about how Marcus maybe confronts those who betrayed him. I know we hear about him riding off to confront, someone who was trying to take his position. But we don't often hear too much about that. We hear that people are evil, they're going to confront us, we should be prepared to face them, we shouldn't be surprised when they, spit in our face or kick dust on our shoes. So I guess my question is, how far do you take it? Do you try stick up and say, hey, I want to confront this individual to share my feelings so they can appreciate how I feel? Or do we say, it's not worth our energy, we're only going to be disappointed, and we need to kind of rise above and not deal with that, those type of situations?
Yeah, I don't think there's like a hard and fast rule that you always confront, you always ignore. I think it's kind of a case by case basis, right? And that's the sort of art versus the science of Stoicism is, when does one let something go, and when does one stand up for what's right or themselves? So I'd like to think that Marcus tried to approach things on a case-by-case basis, right? Think about someone like his brother Lucius Verus was this sort of complicated, less than perfect figure, and Marcus sort of finds a way to put him to use, and he writes in Meditations that his brother's character improves his own. But maybe there were other people who he felt like they were too far gone, and he tried to make sure that they didn't infect him, or that they sort of kept his arm's distance from them. So I don't think there's like some clear, this is the Stoic thing about when to respond and when not to respond. But I think generally erring on the side of empathy, erring on the side of self-control, erring on the side of forgiveness is probably the way that a Stoic would want to think about it.
Okay. Yeah, that's super helpful. And, I think with some of the conversations I've had, one thing that it's led to is, when I approach the conversation and I notice that the other party typically is just trying to make their point or stand up for themselves and isn't necessarily reciprocating, that's kind of when I pull the ripcord and say, this may not be the healthy situation. But again, at the end of the day, I try and look at it and say, did this actually make me feel better, or do I feel worse because of it? And how do I think about it in the future?
That's a great rule. Kevin.
Cool. Thank you.
Yes. Hi, Ryan.
Hi.
I'm a lot less nervous on this question than
right.
last time. So thank you again for the recommendation for Deep Work.
It's a great book.
It just came in today, so I'm gonna dive deep into this. So thank you. My question today is really about the difference between Epicureans versus Stoicism. Sure. And I mean, just kind of talking generally, I know there's a lot of different differences between the two, of course. I was just kind of doing my last minute notes here, but for, like on the question on what's the purpose of life, the Epicureans would say it's in the pursuit of pleasure. And then, Stoicism is for the pursuit of virtues. I guess like, it just seems like they both, they're both going towards the same goal. It seems like there's a lot of tension between the two. What would you say is the main tension between the two? And I mean, is just one better suited to someone's personality type that kind of dictates what someone kind of goes with?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would encourage everyone to read Epicurus, as Seneca is saying. There's a great Penguin Classics translation that we can link to. I think it's called The Art of Happiness, Billy, if you want to put that in there. And there's another book that I liked somewhat recently. It wasn't amazing, but it's called How to Be an Epicurean, I think. We'll link to that. But I would just read Epicurus directly because he's very accessible and very practical. He does get a little off into some physics that I don't think are super relevant. It's weird to hear this guy 2,000 years ago talking about atoms and stuff. You're like, what? How did you know?
Right.
So all of which is to say, like, just actually read the Epicureans because, like, you should. But Seneca says that the main difference is he's using the word politics, but I think he means like being involved in life. He says that the Epicurean does not get involved in politics unless he has to. And he says the Stoic gets involved in politics unless something stops him. So I take that to mean, again, not like running for office necessarily, but that the Epicurean is like, I'm pursuing my own individual enlightenment and pleasure internally. Like I'm withdrawing from the world and pursuing this thing. And the Stoic is saying, no, my purpose, my duty is to be of use. It's to contribute. It's to be involved, to be in the thick of things. And that to me is the tension. I think to me, the Epicurean is closer to the monk and Stoic is much closer to the sort of practical, pragmatic, sort of involved figure in daily life.
Okay.
It's a great question.
Thank you.
Yeah. Juan, who seems to be at the Acropolis.
Hey, here I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So, hey, everyone. Greetings from Mexico. Hey, Ryan, I'm sorry for your loss, man.
Oh, thank you.
First of all, thank you for this space. It is always exciting to meet someone who has had a great impact in your life. Ever since I picked up the Daily Stoic 5 years ago, I started a path of giving up drinking, starting my own company, and starting a new career as organizational psychologist.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah, thanks. So the question is, I'm a change manager and run my own consulting agency. I have developed a method based on Stoic tools and concepts, organizational psychology, and innovation tools in order to manage change. So what is your perspective about using Stoicism in order to manage change effectively in the corporate business world, and or which tools, concepts would you apply?
Yeah, I mean, I do think the Stoics would say that the one constant in life is change. And Marcus Aurelius probably talks about change more than anything else in meditations. You know, he compares it to being like a river. He compares it to this thing that's sort of sweeping over us. and you know, he says that all good things in life have come from change, even that death itself is a change. Life is a change, right? You didn't exist, and then you did exist, and then when you die, you know, death is kind of a final change. So I think getting comfortable with change is a key part of Stoicism. I think part of the reason people are bad at change is ego. You know, we want to keep things a certain way. We want to keep them as they are. We think that we have control over them. So to me, the Stoic idea of kind of flexibility, adaptability, resilience is you know, a key Stoic tenet for a reason, because think of all the changes that were happening in Marcus's time. Think of all the changes that were happening in Epictetus's time. The whole world is always changing, and we have to figure out a way how to go with that change. Even the Stoic concept of the logos, this idea that we're like dogs tied to a cart. We're not controlling where it's going. We've got to figure out how to adapt, how to be led a little bit. And anyways, that's how I would think about it. Let's do one more question. Arturo, you got it.
Hey, Ryan. First of all, my condolences for your loss. And I had a question. I wanted to ask, what are the Stoics' principles on approaching the person that your significant other, or the person that you want to marry? Reason why I'm asking this is I'm 30 years old, and I always imagine that by this time I will be married and things like that. And I think in the past year I've discovered Stoicism. I've listened to more podcasts like Tim Ferriss, Jane Parrish, and I found myself in this discovery path that I'm very invested in. And I see now relationships more like, not to be selfish, but I think that right now I'm more dedicated on me than on that. So whenever I read about Stoicism, I don't see them address this as often. And like, they don't bring, like, even though it's one of the most important decisions that you take on your life. So wanted to hear your take of how would a Stoicism approach finding the person in their life? And if you had any book recommendations on that.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I think one of the reasons you don't hear them talk about it is that the Stoics were, you know, mostly men. And the Stoics, you know, we hear from them primarily, you know, we hear primarily of these sort of arranged, almost political marriages. They lived in a patriarchal society. So this idea that you would find someone that you loved and be with them for that reason, or even that you would try to improve yourself to be in that, you know, these are not questions that the Stoics were asking, because culturally it didn't make sense. But I do talk about, in Lives of the Stoics, I talk about Antipater, who has written a little bit about marriage and relationships. I'll just read you this passage. It says, to Antipater, a successful city and a successful world could only be built around the keystone of family. Marriage, he said to his students, was among the primary and most necessary of appropriate actions. Did Antipater get married himself? Was he a better father and husband than Socrates? The records are scant, but this sentence from his book on marriage sure makes it sound that way. Moreover, he said, it is the case that he who hasn't experienced a wedded wife and children has not tasted the truest and genuine goodwill. Again, I think that there's some judgment in here that I wouldn't make in the modern society. Obviously, it's a little gendered, but Foucault cites Antipater and the Stoics on the sort of Stoic idea of oikos or okos, which is like the home life, the conjugal unit. So I do think marriage and a relationship, however one wants to constitute it or think about it, due to their preferences and attractions, all good. I think it's just realizing that, you know, if you think that philosophy is about making you this sort of solo, unattached island of a person, I think you're missing the point of the philosophy, if that makes sense.
Okay.
But I wish you the best, and I hope you keep working on yourself. I think that's the best way to find a great relationship. Anyways, guys, this was a complete honor. It's been wonderful talking with all of you. We'll definitely do this again. We're going to keep running the course. We do the end of year challenge, New Year, New You, which I hope to see you in. And we're working on some other courses for the year. If you like Daily Stoic and these courses, you can sign up for Daily Stoic Life, which we'll link to. And Daily Stoic Life members, not only do we have a Facebook group where we talk about stuff, we just had this great discussion about James Stockdale over the weekend and some of his decisions during Vietnam, which I thought was a high level discussion that I hadn't really had anywhere else. And then you get all the courses for free. And you can do them at your leisure. And we do a lot of quarterly Q&As like this as well. So I hope to see a bunch of you all there. And it's been an honor. I appreciate everyone investing in themselves and taking up their tablets and going to school, as Marcus really said. And I hope you continue the study of Stoicism, and I hope to see you all around.